Are Canada and the United States heading for war? Since Donald Trump's return to office, relations between the two countries have deteriorated sharply. Amidst punitive tariffs on Canadian goods and talk of annexing Canada as the 51st US state, there are reports that Canadian defence planners are even modelling contingencies for a US invasion. But while none of this means that a conflict is imminent, it does raise serious questions. Just how stable is the relationship, and could current tensions, if left unchecked, eventually evolve into something far more serious? Hello and welcome, I'm James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. In international relations, there are many examples of enemies that became partners. Countries that once fought devastating wars can, over time, develop shared institutions, close economic interdependence, and even military alliances. But equally, the reverse is also true. Countries that have close bonds can become opponents. Political changes, economic conflict, or ideological differences can all lead to the breakdown of even the closest partnerships. A good case in point are the current tensions between Canada and the United States. For decades, the two countries have been seen as a model of good neighbourly relations. As well as being military allies within NATO, they've been close economic partners. All the while, the two nations share close social and cultural bonds. And yet, today, we're discussing scenarios that until recently would have sounded all but impossible. The United States of America and Canada share the world's longest international land border, stretching nearly 9,000 kilometres or over 5,500 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific and via Alaska into the Arctic. It's often been described as the longest undefended boundary on Earth. In terms of territory, Canada is slightly larger than the United States, covering close to 10 million square kilometres or almost 4 million square miles. But demographically and economically, the differences are striking. While the United States has over 340 million inhabitants, Canada's population is around 40 million. As for their economies, the US gross domestic product stands at around $25 trillion, while Canada's is roughly $2 trillion. In military terms, the United States maintains the most powerful armed forces in the world, with global reach across land, sea, air, space, and cyber domains. In contrast, while Canada has its own highly professional forces, they're significantly smaller in number and reach. Although the relationship between Canada and the United States is now extremely close, it hasn't always been that way. Having remained loyal to the British Crown during the American Revolutionary War, despite hopes that it might join the rebellion, during the War of 1812, American forces invaded what is now Canada. While the conflict ended without major territorial change, it left a lasting mark on Canadian identity. Resisting American invasion became part of the country's historical narrative. From there, relations remained uneasy throughout the rest of the 19th century, with disputes over borders, trade and fisheries. But while tensions occasionally flared, leading to fears of conflict, diplomacy eventually won. As boundary issues were settled through negotiation and arbitration, economic ties began to deepen. Meanwhile, as Britain's imperial priorities shifted and Canada became a confederation in 1867, things began to stabilise. By the early 20th century, the prospect of conflict had all but disappeared, and new ties were emerging. This was highlighted during the First and Second World Wars, when the two countries fought alongside each other as close allies. After 1945, Canada-US relations entered a golden era. The start of the Cold War and the threat of communism underscored the importance of close cooperation. As a result, they became founding members of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, thereby committing themselves to collective defence. Following on from this, NORAD was created in 1958 as a joint command responsible for the defence of North American airspace. Since then, defence and intelligence ties between the two countries have flourished. But on top of the military relationship, they've also built close economic ties. Free trade agreements led to steadily closer cooperation across manufacturing, agriculture and services. All the while, socially and culturally, the two nations enjoyed a truly special partnership. All this meant that for decades, this dense web of economic, military and social ties created a powerful foundation for what appeared to be one of the most stable relationships in the world. And yet, since January 2025, the tone and substance of relations has dramatically shifted. While the second Trump administration has adopted a far more confrontational stance towards its allies more broadly, Canada has been a particular focus. Politically, the relationship has been harmed by Trump's frequent comments that Canada would be better off as part of the United States. Even though supporters insist that this is merely rhetorical or even humorous, the comments have had a profound effect in Canada, where they've fueled concerns about aggressive US expansionism. Meanwhile, the imposition of sweeping tariffs on a wide range of Canadian products, including steel, aluminium, agricultural goods and energy exports, has been widely seen as an attempt to bully Canada, or at least to punish it for not bowing to Trump's wishes. Most recently, reports suggest that US officials have even met with figures linked to Alberta's separatist movement, some of whom have suggested that the Canadian province could break away and become a US state. All this has naturally fueled a strong Canadian response. Public opinion polling now suggests a sharp decline in trust towards the United States. At the same time, leaders from across the political spectrum have rejected any talk of annexation. In particular, the country's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has taken a particularly strong stance. Calling Canada's sovereignty non-negotiable and condemning the tariffs as unjustified economic coercion, he's repeatedly said that his country is prepared to respond in kind. All the while, he's been taking steps to diversify Canada's trade, strengthen its alliances, and build its own defence industries to reduce reliance on the United States. But perhaps most tellingly, reports have emerged that Canadian defence planners are now modelling scenarios involving a severe breakdown in relations with the United States, including the possibility of an invasion. Of course, such planning doesn't mean that war is imminent, let alone expected. After all, militaries routinely consider low probability but high impact scenarios. Nevertheless, the fact that these ideas are now considered reflects a striking shift in strategic thinking. The United States is no longer treated as a purely friendly neighbour. But could this deterioration eventually lead to conflict? For some, it's certainly becoming a distinct possibility. There are now worrying political, economic and diplomatic signs of escalating tensions. Aside from the fallout over trade, the questioning of Canadian sovereignty is normalising previously unthinkable ideas of territorial expansion. In addition, US threats against Greenland and the increasingly warlike rhetoric over other issues have raised fears about the direction of US policy. This becomes even more significant when considered alongside broader geopolitical trends. The Arctic is becoming more strategically significant as climate change opens new maritime routes and access to resources. Both Canada and the United States have interests there alongside Russia, China and other actors. But while Washington and Ottawa have traditionally cooperated over regional security, growing differences over sovereignty, as well as access to valuable minerals and energy reserves, could, in future, create friction. Taken all together, many see this as pointing to a growing rivalry that could eventually spill over into armed conflict. But even if neither side has any intention of going to war, their strained relations mean that even relatively minor disputes could escalate. Miscalculation is always possible when trust and communication have been undermined. But balanced against this, many argue that any conflict remains highly unlikely. For a start, the two countries are still economically interdependent. Indeed, the costs of war would almost certainly outweigh any conceivable gains. Secondly, it seems likely that domestic politics would act as a brake. And although Trump has been pushing the boundaries of presidential power, one suspects an attack on Canada would surely be a step too far. Then there are important international institutional constraints. Any attack on Canada would likely spark a backlash from European partners and NATO allies, although of course critics would now point out that even this might not be enough to stop the US if it really wanted to do something. Ultimately, while the current strains are certainly worrying, any sort of conflict remains extremely unlikely. But in many ways, that's not the real point. It's the fact that such questions are now being raised at all that's so telling. It reflects a period of uncertainty in North American politics and in the wider international order. For decades, US-Canada relations were believed to be fundamentally stable and immune to rivalries seen elsewhere. However, the current strains show just how far and fast even the most seemingly stable situations can change. Alliances last not because they're inevitable, but because the sides maintain shared interests, norms and policies. When these change, old assumptions necessarily disappear. The challenge for both countries, therefore, will be to prevent current tensions from reshaping long-standing ties. And this won't be easy. While it's tempting to think that things can simply return to normal when Trump goes, the deep bonds of trust have been broken. Those will take a long time to repair, if at all. Whatever happens, Canadians will remember what they're seeing at the moment. Even if a new president wants to rebuild the friendship, many will be wary about being too tied to their southern neighbour. In this sense, even if the countries don't end up in conflict, the close relationship that they once enjoyed has been fundamentally undermined. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.